So this is, to me, is an example of Trump derangement syndrome, unfortunately, that will harm people. Look, just because Donald Trump says something doesn't mean you should oppose it. Hello and welcome to the Ann and Phelim Scoop. I'm Phelim McAleer. Ann McElhinney is unavailable today. Just me, for what that's worth. What's on the show today? In a few days, it will be the 3rd anniversary of October 7. We're going to bring you a special excerpt of our October 7 play. We're going to talk about the significance of October 7 and our plans for the future. And unfortunately, other people are choosing to mark the October 7 anniversary differently. Greta Thunberg, shame on you, is on a flotilla to Gaza, bringing aid apparently. Even though several countries have said, drop the aid off with us and we will make sure that it gets through. No, they want to bust through a war zone and get arrested by the Israeli authorities so that they get good publicity and basically damage Israel's reputation. So that's what they're not interested in helping Palestinians. If they did, they would save all the money of the flotilla, send the money for aid, which would be delivered. Many countries have offered to deliver aid on their behalf, but they've refused those offers. So whatever happens to them, bear in mind it's their responsibility. We'll come to that later. Oh, and Queers for Palestine, we bring you the latest. It's not going to work out well, let's just say. And also on the show, taking Tylenol during pregnancy was bad, until Trump said it was bad, and then, of course, everyone rushed to say how good it was. Just goes to show you that there's no limit to the harm leftists will do to show how much they hate Trump. And where are those outraged leftists, I wonder, when it's discovered that a movie has been doctored to remove gay characters? We bring you the full story of this untold scandal. And the things I do for this podcast, I review the Kamala Harris book, 107 Days, her diary of the worst campaign in election history. So I bring you the full review. You won't want to miss it. So let's go on to the show. In a few days, we'll have the 3rd anniversary of October 7. Let's just remember what October 7 was. It was the massacre of 1,200 Israelis, men, women, and children. They took 200 hostages. They conducted a massacre at a music festival where over 300 young people were murdered just for dancing at a music festival. They murdered men, women, children, babies, dogs, cats. This was not a war. This was a massacre. We very quickly saw in Ireland and in other places that October 7 was being forgotten. So we got on a plane. We went to Israel. We interviewed survivors and we made a play. We created a play out of their testimony. It was called October 7. It's been on in New York, off-Broadway for 6 weeks. It was in Princeton. It was in UCLA. Most recently, it was in Bowdoin College. Let's look at the standing ovation we got in Bowdoin College. Wherever it is loved. Wherever it is loved. The New York Post called it spellbinding, a reservoir for truth. Alan Dershowitz, the lawyer and academic, said it was absolutely brilliant and needs to be seen by everyone. If you want to bring it to your college, let us know. If you want to bring it to your synagogue, to your town, let us know. Please go to unreportedstorysociety.com, write to us there. We read all the emails. So let's just play a little clip from October 7, the play that was on in New York. This is Zaki Mizrachi. He's played by Jeff Girder. This is him talking. Zaki worked for Coca-Cola. He installed the Coca-Cola machines at the festival, at the Nova Festival. So therefore he knew where to go to rescue the young people. He rescued almost 100 people in that day. He was an Orthodox Jew, so he broke Sabbath to do that. Let's hear him talk about that. Let's hear how a true hero sounds like. Remember, every word you hear here is 100% verbatim. No added drama, no editorializing, just 100% verbatim.
David, my next-door neighbor, and I decided we would drive toward the festival to rescue the kids who had escaped. I knew the way to Reim. I'd just been there because Coca-Cola was one of the festival sponsors. We saw the first group of people escaping. Come, get in the car. We'll take you to someplace safe, to our house, our yard.
We're okay, but there are others back there. Go save them.
I drove on. We stuffed 8, 9 kids into a car that barely seats 6. They were upset, but not injured. They couldn't understand why no one was there to protect them. No army, no police. I drove as fast as I could, several rounds, each time going deeper into the zone where the terrorists were. We did what we had to do. On the way there, we drove through the fields, but on the way back, we took the main roads where the terrorists had been active. We saw bodies, cars full of bullet holes, abandoned. But all in all, we brought 90, 100 people to our home. We did not leave anyone we saw behind. Anyone we saw, we took. They squeezed in. If the terrorists were shooting at us, we didn't notice. We came within a couple 100 meters of the festival grounds. It was horrible. We saw smoke, soot. We heard nothing. Silence. We felt it. Deafening silence. The silence of death. We felt as though time had stopped.
That guy with the kippah? That's your husband?
He couldn't believe that someone with a kippah who observes Shabbat would come to save them on a Saturday.
Yes, I broke Shabbat. But it's obvious. To save people. It's the most important thing in Judaism, to save a life. It's the most holy thing. And this was the first time that I had broken Shabbat in many, many years. So I hope that people will learn something about us religious people. We're not just some closed community who only cares about ourselves. Maybe now people will think differently about people like us.
As I said, if you want this play to go to your locality, write to us at october7theplay.com or write to us at the unreportedstorysociety.com. We are dependent on your contributions to make this play happen, to keep it going. If you want to contribute to that, please go to october7theplay.com, press the donate button. It costs a lot of money to put these plays on. Bowdoin was almost 80,000 to bring it there. We had to bring the actors, the brilliant actors from New York. They had to rehearse. We needed rehearsal space. Security was massive, transport, accommodation, but it was so powerful that leftists boycotted it. And that to me, that is the most powerful signal of all, that they knew that if they went there, their hearts might be moved. So we're going to bring this story to everyone. We're going to put it in every newspaper, every media outlet, and the world is not going to forget October 7. But there are some people you cannot talk to. As you know, there is a pro-Palestinian flotilla bringing apparent aid to Gaza. And they're, as you're listening to this, they may have arrived in Gaza or they'll be very close. This is not bringing aid. This is bringing media attention and trouble and strife to a war zone. They have been told, the people on the flotilla have been told time and time again, numerous countries have said, give us the aid, we will deliver it for you safe and securely. But they have ignored this. They want to go and provoke a reaction with the Israeli government, with the Israeli forces. They're sailing into a war zone. But all has not been peaceful on the flotilla. You know, you've heard people say that queers for Palestine is like chickens for KFC, but nobody believes this. But now it seems like someone has walked off Greta's flotilla of 20 or 30 boats. According to the Daily Mail, the problem is that Islam is incompatible with several of the queer people on the boat. Queer, I don't know what that means either, but, you know, basically gay people who now have decided to call themselves queer. So Khalid Bujima has apparently left the flotilla. In 2 video streams posted on social media, the Daily Mail reports, he's understood to have complained about the addition of members of the Tunisian LGBTQ plus community to the convoy. I'm with you, Khaled. He said activists who joined the flotilla when it stopped at the northern port of Bizerte. I mean, I don't like boats anyway. Who would want to be on a boat, honestly? Why go on holidays to somewhere that's not as comfortable as the place you live, where you have to sort of climb over someone to go to the bathroom, and the bathroom is inadequate? But that's enough about boats. I'm with you, Khaled. But imagine spending a month in the Mediterranean with activists, especially queer activists. It's like, you walk into a restaurant, or you're sitting at a table, and then there's 4 people at the table. How do you know which one's a vegan? And the answer is because they'll bleep and tell you. So how do you know which members of your flotilla are the queer activists? Because they'll bleep and tell you. Queer, 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 queer. And that's all their identity is. And a lot of it's a made-up identity. A lot of it's mental illness, the trans bit. These are not, and the violence and the aggression, these are not people of sound mind. Now, I think Khalid Boujima is probably not of sound mind either, if he is into radical Islam. But who knew the clash of cultures that we've all been predicting would manifest itself on a boat in the middle of the Mediterranean? But it did. And Khalid says, we were lied to about the identity of some of the participants in the vanguard of the flotilla. I accuse the organisers of having hidden this aspect from us, he said. The cause of his frustration was allegedly the participation of activist Saif Ayadi on the flotilla, a communist queer militant. My God, a communist queer militant. I would throw myself into the Mediterranean and take my chances if I think I was on a boat with a communist queer militant who boarded the convoy when it stopped off in Tunisia. Another prominent activist, apparently, Mariam Meftah, took to social media to voice her opposition to LGBTQ activists, quote, taking advantage of the pro-Palestinian cause, one that is, quote, sacred to us as Muslims. Yeah, she's a bit more liberal, Mariam. Now, she says, everyone's sexual orientation is a private matter, but being a, quote, queer, close quotes, activist means touching on society's values and taking a path that risks placing my children and loved ones in a situation we reject, she wrote. Very good. This is from the Daily Mail. I refuse to have my son offered a sex change at school. I call on everyone to save the situation and repair the mistake made against the people who gave us their blood so that this flotilla could see the light of day. Wow. Okay. Let me have a look. Now, that is well done there, Mariam Meftah. There might be hope for Mariam yet. And then on the same day, presenter Samir El-Wafi expressed a similar sentiment. Quote, Palestine is first and foremost the cause of Muslims, and it cannot be separated from its spiritual and religious dimension, with Jerusalem at the heart of its symbols and destiny. So why involve in it dubious activists serving other agendas that do not concern us and have nothing to do with Gaza? You couldn't have put it better there, Samir. But actually, I would disagree, Samir, some ways. I think, unfortunately, this is part of the queer identity now. I was at a very, very sad meeting with a number of parents of transgender kids, as they call them, kids with mental difficulties who are being exploited by the medical establishment. And some of the parents were Jewish, and they were saying their children are, big pro-Palestinian people signing letters and doing that kind of thing. And they said it's all part of the one identity, the angry identity of these activists now. So, Samir, that's the movement you're part of, whether you like it or not. And my favorite story from this whole fiasco is that Iranian diplomats who were in the United States for the United Nations General Assembly were banned from going to Costco. Apparently, the diplomats would, because their country is a basket case, they can't get anything, any electronic goods, computers, even food, certain types of food. So they would use the United Nations General Assembly to bring vans to Costco, buy the stuff and have it shipped back through the embassy pouches, the embassy travel system. So President Trump, in an epic piece of trolling, and actually we would, Costco is one of our favorite places in the United States to visit. And we would say, we would recognize that as a major blow to the Iranian diplomats. So well done, President Trump. I don't want to spend too long on the next piece, but it's the Tylenol story, where President Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the health secretary, warned pregnant women not to take Tylenol, saying there is a connection, or could be a connection, to autism, the increased numbers of autistic children. And boy, oh boy, were they lambasted. And the media, let's put up some media responses there to that story about how wrong they were and how unscientific they were and how terrible they were and how awful they were. There's the BBC and the NBCs and the other Cs, every C basically on the planet. And that's fine, free speech and all that. But a few years ago, every media organization was saying exactly the opposite. Look at these headlines. Look at these headlines from journals, from media organizations, from outlets, from respected medical journalists, all warning that taking Tylenol during pregnancy could lead to autism or some neurodivergent problems for children. So this is, to me, is an example of Trump derangement syndrome, unfortunately, that will harm people. Look, just because Donald Trump says something doesn't mean you should oppose it. I'm reading a book at the moment, An Abundance of Caution by David Zweig, who I hope to have on the show next week. And he pointed out that the American Academy of Pediatrics said children should go back to school in the summer of 2020. Trump then tweeted, "Open the schools now." And the next week they changed their mind. And there was no new science. In fact, all the European countries, 26 European countries, had decided to open their schools. So there was increased medical proof for opening schools. But because Trump had tweeted, "Open the schools," they said American schools should be closed, which led to untold catastrophes for American children. And I think the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I think all the other lost young men, a lot of that nihilism that comes from these young men comes from not being at school for several years back then, not being in a education or social environment. And I just want to give you this little story about an Australian film that was opened in China. The film is called Together, and there were some changes made for the Chinese market. They did some additional special effects to obscure nudity, but in a shocking development, they also made a gay couple, a straight couple. There was a gay wedding in it, and they superimposed a female on top of the male. Of course, because the Chinese did it, there is no outrage because it wasn't done by Americans. It wasn't done by white people. So Hollywood is only outraged about social mores and censorship when it's done by President Trump or someone similar. When the Chinese do it, they just take the money and run. They don't boycott China. They don't say, "We will not send any more movies to China until you allow us full artistic expression." When the Chinese say jump, they say how high. So it's that time of the year again. It's a season for the books on how I won the last election. Yes, it's that time of year when politicians, consultants, fixers give their excuses or take their victory lap. Journalists also put out books about elections. And I have to admit, it's one of my favorite genres, these post-election books, because as a journalist, you very quickly can find out who's lying, who's not telling the truth. You can see different stories from different angles, and you can work out just what the truth is. And it's amazing. People will lie and lie and lie and lie to self-promote. People are never wrong, of course. They'll never admit to mistakes. So it's Kamala's turn to tell her side of the story, how she lost an election against a man who was apparently a threat to democracy and was going to destroy America, etc. So you would think that would have been an easy election to win. The book is called 107 Days. which is how long her presidential campaign was, and also how long I felt it was taking to read the book. It's structured as a diary of her campaign. Every chapter, a few pages really, is a different day. But really, the book is really Kamala's appointment diary, just put on the page. 107 days is a description of her travel and description of the interviews and the speeches she gave when she arrived there. For example, it's like, it's day 14. I went to Pittsburgh. Did I mention what a beautiful city Pittsburgh is? Where I gave an amazing speech about how evil Trump was and how important it was for government to fund transgender surgery for illegal aliens in prison. I paraphrase somewhat, but you get the drift. Thin as the book is, it does occasionally give you a glimpse into just how bad a candidate Kamala Harris was, and just how bad her campaign was. Perhaps the two are connected: bad candidate, bad campaign. She constantly complains that 107 days was too short of a time for America to get to know her. At which point, I wanted to shout at the book, "You were the vice president for 4 years, girlfriend." But she says it was 107 days. So let's put that aside. You have 107 days to introduce yourself to the public. Obviously, the first thing you do is a blitz of high-profile media interviews and podcasts, national and local. You take a day to do the rounds of the big beasts in the media. Then you do the podcasts. Then everywhere you are, you do about 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 local media interviews. And you can do them standing up. You can do them sitting down. You can do them on the plane. You can do them getting off the plane. The local media would be an amazing advantage because people still trust, to a certain extent, their local media. It would be a big get to get the vice president, so they would make a big thing out of the interview. People in these areas will be seeing the interview for days afterwards. But do you know how long it took for Kamala Harris to give her first big interview in the campaign? She waited 40 days to give an interview, and even then, she or her team didn't trust her to give the interview alone. It was a twofer with her vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz. That's right, 40 days in. 40 days in. And she couldn't be allowed to stand in front of a camera, sit in front of a camera alone, but she wasn't ready to give an interview for 40 days in. Similarly, she took 5 days off these 107 days to prep for the debate with Donald Trump. 5 days. She'd spent a life in politics, but she needed nearly a week to prep for a debate, for a simple 90-minute debate. And don't forget, it's 90 minutes. There's a break in the middle. There's questions. There's Trump's answers. So she probably is only speaking for 30 minutes. And she took almost a week to prepare for that. I think that's an example of how she has lived in a bubble since she was elected in California and then became VP because, as Joe Biden said, he needed a black woman. She's never been challenged. She never sought to be challenged. She didn't like to be challenged. And this, by the way, is from a woman, as she constantly reminds you in the book, she's a former prosecutor. She should be used to making her case, giving her closing argument. But no, it took her 40 days to give the big interview. And it took her 5 days to prepare for a debate where she would be speaking maybe 30, 35 minutes. I cannot describe how incredibly thin this book is. There is no analysis. There is no behind the scenes. She gets a few digs in at the Bidens. She seemed to particularly dislike Jill Biden, who, as she said, Jill Biden, when Joe was thinking about dropping out, when there was enormous pressure on Joe to drop out, Jill grabs her and says, "Are you loyal?" And as Kamala and her husband say, "I've kept my mouth shut for 4 years. I've been loyal. And you never stuck up for me. And now you come and say, am I loyal?" So she's not fond of Jill Biden, that can be said. And that's about the most gossipy and behind the scenes information there is. But there is no behind the scenes information. There's no behind the scenes analysis. There's no analysis of why she lost. She never addresses why she thinks she lost. She never addresses any mistakes she made. According to her, her team were brilliant. There was no mistakes made. So you leave the book none the wiser, except you know that Kamala was the worst candidate you could possibly have had, that she ran the worst campaign that could possibly be run, and that America is very, very, very lucky that Kamala Harris is not president of the United States. So that's all for today's show. We will see you next week on the Alan Phelim Scoop. Don't forget, we're a 501c3. If you want to help us keep doing what we do, please go to unreportedstoriesociety.com and give what you can. Thank you. Bye.